Hello, everyone. I am Storyteller. Thank you for visiting this peaceful place. I know you are looking for something soothing to help you fall asleep, and I am here to accompany you. If you enjoy, please give me a like and subscribe, and let me know where you are from. Thank you. Well, beyond the fence. I'm gonna take a freight train down at the station, Lord. I don't care where it goes. Gonna climb a mountain, the highest mountain. I'll jump off, nobody gonna know. The Marshall Tucker Band. I'm so angry. I did my best. I really did. That road from the army base where we live now, running out west towards that looted Costco outlet near Corvallis, is littered with abandoned cars and trucks, all rusting out, tires flat, gas tank lids and caps open. I know all the places where you have to go off-road to get around them, but there are always things you just can't predict. The law of unintended consequences, they call it. That's what happened to me, I guess. I became an unintended consequence. I don't know. Maybe that's not right. I'm not thinking very clearly right now. Molly, too. My Staffordshire Terrier. She was an unintended consequence as well, maybe. I guess. I felt worse about her in the end, honestly. I loved Molly so much. Those little fuckers. I hate them so much, and now I am them. The old Toyota 4Runner was running pretty smooth despite the degraded quality of the fuel that was left to us, and it only bogged down on me a few times during the drive, but never stalled out. When I reached the parking lot, I came to a stop by the loading docks, like always. I grabbed the cut-down Remington 12-gauge and stuffed the box of pumpkin balls into my jacket pocket. Normally, I would have left the driver's side door open, but I had to keep Molly inside. I certainly wasn't bringing her in there. The rear door to the Costco was still propped open, just like it always is, and I found the battered old orange hand truck sitting right there in the corner, just like it always is. Things looked much as they always did. I couldn't hear anything, but I still kept the shotgun pointed directly ahead of me as I entered the store floor from the back room. I clicked on the small flashlight mounted to the barrel with some electrical tape and squinted into the darkness. I waited 15 seconds, then another 15, and then I entered. I left the hand truck right there and proceeded very slowly. It was my turn to do this today, and I never argued against it when my turn came. But Kaylee was my only remaining child, and I had to get back to her. I was in no big rush. I simply had to do my job and get back. I'm just so angry now. I really messed this up. I took a can of baked beans off the closest shelf and threw it as far as I could down one of the aisles, and then I shuffled back a few steps to see what would happen, listening for the sound of footsteps, ready to run if there were too many. I heard nothing. I waited 15 seconds, then another 15, and then I moved forward. A short time later, I had the first load of supplies stacked up on the hand truck. I left it there and checked the back room again with the flashlight beam on my shotgun, and then checked the back parking lot for a moment just to make sure everything was cool out there too. Seeing nothing of concern, I hauled the first load of supplies out and loaded them into the back of the 4Runner as quietly as possible. When I returned, I took all of the same precautions. I made no assumptions. But again, everything seemed clear, so I went ahead and gathered up the rest of the supplies. In the end, I had canned foods, batteries, bottled water and juice, toilet paper, napkins, Tylenol, garbage bags, t-shirts, vitamins, and a few other things. There wasn't very much left at that Costco by that point, but we didn't go much further into the more previously populated urban areas until it became truly necessary. Again, I checked the back room and the parking lot before I hauled the hand truck out through the loading dock door and placed everything in the back of the old Toyota SUV as quietly as possible. Then I heard the sound of something being knocked over, coming through the rear door of the Costco outlet. It sounded metallic, maybe a bucket or a garbage pail being tipped over, or something like that. I pointed my shotgun in that direction for a second, and then jumped into the driver's seat of the Toyota and drove off. I had what I came for, and Molly was barking like crazy. It would take at least 5 or 6 hours, maybe more, to get back to the base, and I had already traveled at least that same amount of time, just getting there earlier that day. I would definitely have to refuel from the tanks in the back soon. I was ready to push on through, but when it started raining, I knew it would take much longer, and it would be much more dangerous. I had to rethink my plans. I knew a place. It was more important that I just got back to Kaylee than getting back right away. I knew she would be scared if I didn't return that night, but that's obviously better than not returning at all. My sister Amy would comfort her as much as possible. I wasn't looking forward to my night either, but Amy would take care of her until I got there with the supplies. Like I said, I knew a place. It was just past a highway exit sign for Langhorne Avenue. That sign has a red letter X spray painted across it. Everyone knows what that means. Just past that exit, along the side of the road just before you reach Redmond, there is a little sleep spot we sometimes use when we have to. It is proven safe. It used to be a small electrical substation, just a little 8x12 steel structure, about 10 feet tall, that once housed some power transmission equipment. At some point, someone gutted it out, and you can still see the old components rusting there, just outside of the door, the tall grass growing up through the cracks. I pulled the Toyota around in front of that old substation, but I kept the engine running, and I stayed inside for a little while, and used my binoculars to search the surrounding area for signs of movement. The sky was gray and the sun was setting, but I saw nothing of concern, so eventually I grabbed the shotgun and my travel bag and got out of the SUV as cautiously and quietly as possible. I left the driver's side door open, despite the light rain. I didn't want to make any unnecessary noise, and if I needed to make a quick escape, that could make the difference. Once Molly and I were inside that old substation, I quickly closed the door behind me and dropped the zip-tie bundled rebar bolts into place. Then I stood there by the door for a while, holding my shotgun, but I didn't hear anything outside, and eventually I relaxed a bit. They don't like the rain, but you never really know. The filthy old mattress was a welcome sight. I sat there as I ate a cold can of Chef Boyardee raviolis. They were so delicious, and I took my time. It was a treat. I had dog food and water for Molly too. She was happy as well. Afterwards, I laid my sleeping bag out on the mattress, and Molly and I fell asleep to the fading sound of rain pattering off the steel roof. It was nice. A few hours later, I was awoken by the sound of Molly's growling and barking. She was standing by the door, and I could hear the sounds of screaming and scratching coming from the other side. I grabbed my shotgun and pulled Molly back, breathing heavily, hoping the door would hold. I checked the rebar bolts. The door seemed solid. After a while, the rain picked up. The violent sounds coming from outside faded away, and then I set the shotgun down and returned to the bed. It was hard to find sleep again. I stared up into the darkness for a while. It was just over 3 years ago when it all began. A facility in the woods of northern Montana where they housed and performed tests on children who had been exposed to experimental biochemical weapons in various locations around the world. Things were fine there until they were not. The confused and sometimes conflicting news reports at the time mostly said that there was an antivirus that was administered to those kids on a daily basis, but one day the supplies ran out. Then, by the next morning, that facility was overrun. Blood and gore. The fences went down. But what no one knew until then was that it was contagious. Most people past the age of adolescence quickly succumb to it, but not everyone. No one really knows why. It all happened very quickly, and then it was all over, and I mean all of it. Everything. The world is very different now. This part of the world, anyway. I really don't know what it's like elsewhere. We don't receive news reports anymore. I eventually fell asleep and woke up a few hours later with Molly cuddled up by my side. I fed her some kibble for breakfast, and then I ate a granola bar and drank a bottle of water and packed up my gear. I looked out through the 2 small peepholes before leaving the safety of the substation with Molly by my side. The rain had stopped, but it was still gray and cloudy. I guess I made a little too much noise unbolting and opening the door. As soon as we stepped outside, I heard the clattering from behind the substation and on the low rooftop overhead. They must have just waited out there all night. I didn't know they were capable of that. I thought they just retreated back into the woods once they quit the hunt. Molly paid the price, not me. I hate myself for that. I hate myself. When they pounced, I fired my shotgun twice and blasted 2 of them in the chest and put them down. Both teenage boys, stark naked and filthy, with elongated nails and teeth, long straggly hair, moving with predatory speed. Unfortunately, there were 3 more who fell on Molly, 2 adults and a kid. I was about to take another shot, but they were all over her. And trust me, she was fighting back like a fucking monster. But I just saw no way to not hit her as well. After a few seconds, I realized she would soon be dead anyway, so I just unloaded my remaining 4 shells and killed them all, including Molly. I was so angry, but I started crying right away. I'm still enraged. They made me kill Molly, those little fuckers. As I was making my way to the driver's side door of the Toyota with my head down and staring at the grass through my tear-blurred vision, that's when the last one got me. He was just a little kid, maybe 10 years old. Perhaps that's why he held back when the others rushed in. I don't know. Who can say? Who knows how they think? I guess I will know soon enough. It's already starting. He came around from the back of the lift gate and dove at me and bit me on my forearm. There was only the one quick bite before I turned around and smashed him in the forehead with the butt of my Remington. But as soon as I got into the forerunner and closed the door, I could see that he had drawn blood. I wiped it off with my bandana and poured some rubbing alcohol on it. I was scared, but I still had some hope. I had my fingers crossed, but I still had some hope. That hope faded quickly along the drive back to the base. I feel sick now. I feel very sick, and it's just getting worse. My head is starting to pound, and I feel like I might need to vomit. My teeth and gums and my fingernails and toenails are all starting to ache. My vision is changing, and my throat is dry. I'm starting to make some involuntary growling sounds, and I cannot stop gripping the steering wheel with all of the strength in my hands. I want to just get out of the Toyota and run. It doesn't even matter where. I was planning to just drop off these supplies by the front gates of the base and then leave. But it's still at least a 2-hour drive, and I am afraid of who or what I will be by the time I get there. I think I have to just turn around right now and drive in the opposite direction for as long as I possibly can. I have reloaded the Remington, and I am keeping it handy. I am sweating and drooling pretty hard now. I can't help it. My clothes are also starting to feel extremely uncomfortable. I think I might need to pull over and remove my shirt and boots soon. Maybe my jeans too. I don't think I can take this too much longer. I keep looking at the woods along the side of the road. I just want to run off into the trees. I want to scream. I want to eat something while it is still breathing. Mostly, I just want to end this before it gets worse. I know that I will never see Kaylee again, and even more than what happened to Molly, that's what makes me feel so sick. I'm sure my sister Amy will take good care of her, but still, I just feel so sick. I keep looking at the woods and at the Remington. I just have to keep driving for a little bit longer now. The radio stations all went dark years ago, and there's only one stupid old CD stuck inside the dashboard stereo in this Toyota for me to listen to as I drive, the Marshall Tucker Band. So I turn it up. What else am I going to do? The hum of the motor is hurting my head, and the lyrics seem right. I'm gonna find me a hole in the wall. I'm gonna crawl inside and die. But no, I don't think so. That would be too easy. I think I'm gonna die with my boots on, and I'm definitely gonna bring some of you little bastards with me. Get ready to eat some of these 12-gauge pumpkin balls. It's not going to be pretty. I'm gonna cut some of you little demons in half while I still can. As many of you as possible, until my ammo runs out. I owe that much to Kaylee and Molly and Amy and all of the others. I see a red letter X spray painted on the exit sign up ahead. I'll be there soon. You'll know when I arrive, you little fuckers. Trust me, you'll know. Gardener's World. You've chosen a good time to pay me a visit. I've pulled up some pretty decent leeks this morning. Got some lovely onions in the store, and a rosemary bush that is totally oblivious to all the nonsense that seems to have befallen our world. My garden really has been my savior, my little farm. I can grow what I need and get by very nicely on what my garden supplies. I do wish I'd had a better crop of carrots. I used the finest bone meal fertilizer, but they were a total bust this year. My soil is a little too heavy for them, too much clay. But it's the carrot fly that really did for them. They said our biggest enemy was the sickness. Then they tried to say it was the foreign governments. Then it was all about misinformation and the enemy within. But I survived because I knew all along my only real enemy is carrot fly. When the gas supply was cut off back in 25, I opened up an old fireplace so I could cook on an open flame indoors. Not a pretty job, no power tools, naturally. So, me and Axe had to do most of the heavy work, hacking out the wall they'd used to gag the old hearth. I like it, though. The exercise, solving problems, working out a plan to get me to the next crop. Most of the stuff we've lost, I didn't care for anyway. You're lucky today with the weather. It gets too smoky and hot indoors, even with the chimney. No, on a day like this, we cook al fresco. Something lovely about doing my cooking in the place where I get most of my food. I'm a man of nature. That's what I am. You saw my roses on the way in, didn't you? It's the roses and the raspberry canes that bring people to my garden. I took part of the fence down so people can see them more easily, so they can come in and explore. Fancy that. In times like these, Someone actually taking part of a good, strong fence down. Well, there's method to my madness. I like to have visitors. Brought you here to me today, didn't it? Relax. Enjoy the sun. Would you like some water? I've got plenty. Since the neighbors have been thinning out, I've been using their houses' guttering, as well as my own, to collect the rain. Been able to grow in their gardens too. That's why I'm doing so well in these tough times. That's why I can afford to lose a few raspberries to curious, hungry bypassers. Waste nothing and work hard. That's me. Do whatever needs to be done. Please, have some water. But how is he going to cook out here, you ask? A very good question. Let me just remove this old tarp. And ta-da! An old enamel bath. Not as common as they once were. But this beautiful old iron roll top was in my neighbor's place. He was a lawyer in the old days. Fat lot of good that did him. Must have cost a fortune. Weighs a ton. I convinced them to help me carry it here in exchange for some food and water. And here we are. Those old claw and ball feet holding it up above my fire. An antique bath sitting on my lawn in the shade of my willow. Heaven, you look a bit concerned. Don't worry about the staining on the sides of the bath. That's inevitable when you cook with direct heat like this. It looks dirty, but it's not. It's just well seasoned from all the grease and juices. I'll just get this fire lit. Thank you for gathering all of this wood, by the way. Told you I'd trade you for water and the raspberries, didn't I? I'm a man of my word. We'll need a couple of buckets of water for the tub. And what else? I think today we'll have a couple of these leeks. No carrots, though. Curse you, carrot fly. And I think we'll have a big, dirty handful of the fresher stems from my gnarly old rosemary bush. Don't worry, the heat will kill the germs. I'll use some of this too. Take a look. It's a pot of fat. My grandma would have called it dripping. You must keep this stuff. It's more valuable than gold, literally, these days. I preserve it whenever I cook. It's full of calories and protein and goodness. It keeps for ages. I've got a cupboard full of it. This is from the last few rabbits I cooked. It's a bit of a cocktail, to be honest. Rabbits, rats, squirrels, street rats, raspberry thieves. Only joking, they weren't thieves. You're not a thief. I can spare a few raspberries. I'm going to get this beautiful stuff nice and hot, and then get the leeks in there. Then the water and the rosemary. Axe, get over here, you big lump. He looks brutal, but I keep him sharp enough to chop the leeks. Look, he's bright as a sushi knife. I can use him to shave. Look close. There now. A slice of leek you can see through. That will just melt in the fat. My mouth is watering. Did you hear that? I love that sound, that sizzle. The popping twigs under the bath. The first chunk of leek sliding around in there, in all that greasy goodness, hissing and cackling. The sun weeping through the old willow. No more horrible planes overhead. No traffic. No more reports about all the doom and gloom. No more sirens. Just a sizzle and a pop, and the waft of home cooking on the late summer breeze. Potatoes. How could I forget potatoes? I sometimes think I'm losing my mind. Not many of this year's crop left, but this is the best way to use them. They add body. Oh, that was unintentional, sorry. Please don't be upset. Poor taste has no place in my garden. Well, I must say, it's been nice to have someone to talk to other than Axe. It has been a while. The raspberries will be dying off soon, and the roses won't last for much longer after that. I suspect I'll be getting fewer visitors. But never mind. I'm going to have plenty of provisions to keep me strong over the winter. And there's still blackberries out, so you never know. I'll be fine in the house, sleeping in the cellar with Axe. Anyway, looks like we've got a rolling boil going here. So sorry, but it's bath time in the morning light. The earlier days of the apocalypse was only chaos. Death and smoke gripped the air. I could feel it stale all around me. It coated my skin, my clothes, my hair. Fear pulsed through every vein. Terror gripped every muscle. Dread gnawed every brain. It was melted into the eyes of everyone you passed. When would it happen to me? When will I watch it happen to someone I love? What could we have done differently? Thoughts that would plague my mind. Over and over, my new reality. The dead no longer stayed dead, and those bitten became deranged, unreachable. They would rip out their hair, scream into the night, pick the skin off their bones until they would be covered in dark, bloody scabs that never seemed to heal. The worst was when they came for you, their eyes empty pits as they chased after you with never-ending endurance and unnatural speed. Nothing like seeing a crippled old woman hit by a truck going 40 mph, only to rise again unfazed, keeping pace with a teenager as she drags her mangled foot behind her. The only advantage left was the inability to use their brains. They couldn't climb ladders or trees. They couldn't open doors or sneak through windows. And in this world, we had to use every advantage we could get. In those early days, everyone still held on to their humanity. The memories of their old life still fresh. I remember thinking that things may eventually go back to normal. Eventually, where my biggest problem was maybe forgetting my lunch at home or something as juvenile as what to wear to my meeting. However, everything this new world touched was tainted. Cities burned, homes abandoned, our population destroyed, leaving only a handful of us left. Fortunate would not a word I would use for the survivors. What I was fortunate for, however, was the group I had found a few months prior. They were mostly good people in present standards. We didn't rob from the living. We didn't murder the innocent or strike down the weak. We took care of one another and watched each other's back. Everyone pulled their weight, from going on supply runs, to working the garden, to gathering firewood. The group consisted of 15 of us who camped deep in a national forest near Colorado Springs. The supply runs were little more than a day's trip, and our traveling group consisted of 3 people always. I would go as often as I could, preferring to stay on the move to keep my shifting thoughts at bay. We always played it safe and quiet, successfully making it 5 months without losing a member. This should have brought me an ounce of comfort, that it has been a while since we lost someone, so it must mean we were getting wiser. Although all I could think to count on was luck, and any day that luck would eventually run out and disaster would strike. We were camped out in some loft apartments bordering the forest. Paul was on watch duty, while Libby slept on the couch adjacent to mine. I remember falling asleep with blankets wrapped around me that reminded me of a moldy scent that used to cling to clothes that were left in the washer longer than they should have been. It used to bother me using strangers' belongings like their clothes or blankets, especially when the entire place still smelled of old cigar smoke. However, I came to be grateful for the comfort of being in a semi-safe, warm spot for the night. I woke with a jerk, jarring myself out of my typical reoccurring nightmare. Sweat forced my dark hair to cling to my forehead. Panting, I mindlessly reached for the weapon beside me. My hands found only a butcher knife I snagged from the kitchen before falling to sleep. Remembering I had given Paul my handgun for his rotation of watch, since it was less bulky than the shotgun he often slugged around. I tried to calm my racing heart, but something had just felt wrong. I looked over, seeing Libby's still sleeping form. I started to stand, wondering how long I had been asleep. Surely Paul was well past his shift. I reached the window, pulling back the blinds to find gray light pouring through the opening. My heart sank. Paul was supposed to wake me hours ago. I didn't see him anywhere in the still, dark living room. I silently walked over to Libby and gave her a gentle shake before stepping back, knowing she slept with a knife under her pillow. She sat up with a gasp, her blonde hair frizzing out from her worn braid. Something is wrong. Paul should have woken me hours ago. She stared at me blankly, my words taking a few seconds longer to comprehend as she shook sleep from her mind. "Where is he?" she asked, blinking vigorously. Her green eyes roamed the shadows of the living room. I had liked Libby from the moment I met her a few months prior. She had found us on her own, days after losing her partner to a minor infection that would have only required a throughout cleaning and maybe a few antibiotic before the outbreak. I've never asked, but she couldn't be much younger than me, her youth apparent in her round cheeks. Paul, on the other hand, was well older than us bother. He looked closer to my father's age, gray hairs dusting his hair and reaching down into his beard. It was out of character for him to wander off on his own. We survived by following strict rules that I know that he knew, because I had gone on more runs with Paul than anyone else in the group. "I'm not sure. Help me look around?" She nodded and tossed her blanket to the side, wobbling a bit as she stood. Once we were sure that he was nowhere inside, my cold panic really did begin to take hold. We quickly gathered our limited supplies. I carried Paul's shotgun and bag with mine, thankful that he had always packed light. Outside, the light from the sun began to coat everything in a golden hue. The chilled, damp air hung from everything from the night before. I moved as silently as I could, keeping my eyes peeled for any sign of Paul. It was mornings like this that seemed to deceive you and hide the horrors of the world we lived in. I would have loved a day like this before the outbreak. The birds chirping, the air smelling of fresh pine, the clouds peacefully drifting through the sky. If only a heavy sense, a dread, didn't cling around me, throat like a noose. I rounded the corner of one of the buildings, with Libby close behind. Before me stretched a courtyard. A few trees stretched tall, casting long shadows. The trees were surrounded by a few dry patches of grass and shrubs. I had to shift my head a bit to the right, but I saw him standing there, maybe 50 feet away. His name was on the tip of my tongue. It was nearly out of my mouth in a whisper before something slammed my jaw shut. The way he stood gave me pause. His neck seemed to hang from his shoulders. The way he stood, his arms dangling empty at his sides, unmoving. I began to reach out to stop Libby, but before I could, she slammed into me. The knife she gripped in her hand clanged loudly through the still air into the shotgun strapped to my back. The breath in my lungs left me like someone had just punched me in the stomach. I looked to where Paul stood, horror clogged in my throat, as his head whipped towards us. What had happened next came in a blur. Minutes passed in seconds, my body numb as my instinct took control of my muscles. I grabbed Libby's arm and began to sprint as fast as I could. We ran across a street, hearing Paul's footfalls quickly gaining on us, I refused to turn around. I didn't trust blindly running into one of dark doorways that could hold any number of threats. Instead, my eyes scanned for anything we could climb. Relief spread over me as I spotted a ladder that hung from one of the buildings. I urged Libby ahead of me, letting her climb the ladder first as I turned, planting my feet. I raised the rifle, cocking it back before aiming it at Paul's head. I fired before my fear could choke me. His nearness unsettled me. He dropped hard to the ground, unmoving and lifeless, his body skidding against the pavement, twisting unnaturally as it landed. I turned, climbing the ladder after Libby. My mind played over what I saw before the bullet ripped through Paul. In a flash, I saw blood that coated Paul's throat, but not from a bite. It looked more like a slash from a blade. I tried to focus on the placement of my hands on the rungs of the ladder, but my mind buzzed. Finally reaching the top, I froze, overlooking onto the roof, where Libby stood motionless. Before her stood a man. His hands reached out before him, as if he were trying to calm a spooked animal. Without thought, I pointed the rifle directly at him. Below me, I was faintly aware of the infected down below, gathering at the base of the ladder. Their frenzies, gargled sounds, reaching my ears. However, all my focus was on the man on the roof. His attention turned to me, and in that instance, shock radiated through me. I knew this man. I recognized his dark brown eyes from another lifetime ago, when his eyes didn't hold circles, bags, and his skin seemed to hang from his bones. He had worked in my department. For years we had walked the same halls and attended the same meetings. His name formed on my mouth, without though, as I slowly lowered the rifle. Jesse? His eyes widened at the sound of his name. He lowered his arms. He looked different, almost unrecognizable, as he stared back at me. Libby and I joined him on the roof. Libby silently sat, staring blankly ahead towards the slow-moving clouds. I, however, stood with Jesse, staring over towards the small town that was now crawling with infected, their screams and snarls echoing through the streets below. "Bad call, firing the rifle," Jesse said. His word came out a harsh whisper. His tone disturbed me. No person was the same after the outbreak, but something about Jesse seemed off. Hysteria seemed to have set into his once warm eyes. His jerky movements made me feel as if he was close to the edge of insanity. This man was not the one I had known in my life prior. I wanted to take Libby and leave as soon as I could, but the streets below were unsafe. I tried to calm my nerves and talk soothingly to the man, giving no indications to my fear other than the bullet already loaded into the chamber. I know I regret it now, but I just wanted to give us enough time to reach the ladder. His hand twitched at his side. Well, look what you did. He angrily pointed at the street below. When he moved his arm, my gaze drifted to his hip, where a gun poked from waistband. I had noticed it before, however. Now I could see it now in detail. I inhaled a sharp breath as realization soaked in. I grabbed the shotgun, slowly bringing it around to my front. The motion caused his head to snap in my direction. "Where did you get that gun?" I asked, my voice coming out shaky. Anger twisted his face as he grabbed it the same second I took aim with the rifle. Libby stood swiftly at the quick change of our position. The gun he held was my gun, the one that I had given to Paul the night prior. "I found it," Jesse said, his voice coming out in a snarl. The image of Paul running towards me replayed in my mind. His throat slit. "You killed Paul," I said, bothered by how my voice quivered. Jesse shook his head hard, as if he were trying to shake a thought out of his head. His arm twitched again. Nausea rolled up my throat, terrified of this crazed man before me. His face kept twitching, and he jerked again, using his free hand to wipe the sweat from his forehead. I have seen my share of evil men in this world, but something about Jesse was different. That is when I saw it. A trickle of blood running down his forearm, poking out from his sleeve, was just the outline of a bite mark. "You're infected, aren't you, Jesse?" Anger contorted his face again as I said his name. He was on the edge of turning. I could see that now. His twitch movement, his sunken eyes, his pale, sweat-soaked skin. All signs that a person was infected. I placed my hand on the trigger, ready to pull it, well aware that if I fired then he would too. We would most likely both go down, and Libby would be alone. However, at least she would be alive. "Don't do this. Please." My voice came out hoarse, pleading. Just then, something shifted in his eye. Clarity. For just a brief moment, the old, kind Jesse I knew was there. "I'm sorry." He looked scared. Then he pulled the gun back, aiming it at his own head, and fired. The force knocked him sideways, and I watched as his body tumbled over the side of the roof. Libby let out a shriek as I stood in silent horror, my hand clamped over my mouth. I ran to the edge, peering over at his disfigured body as it lay 3 stories down. It took only seconds for the horde to surround him and began ripping into his flesh. I stepped back, nearly tripping on thin air. I seen some dark things. I was no stranger to tragedy. However, it was something I could never get used to. The sound of his croaking apology replayed in my mind. Sorry for what? For killing Paul? For not making his bite known sooner, I wondered if he had even known what he had even done to Paul. I know the infection took hold before the person was completely lost, stealing bit by bit until there was nothing left. I knew I would see Jesse again. He would eventually join me in my nightmares, like all the others. Him and Paul would haunt me until I met my own fate one day. Kaala, the de Havilland. Twin Otter charter plane shuddered through gray clouds as its mouthy pilot wrestled with the controls, navigating toward the barely visible landing strip ahead. Like the plane's humming engines, the bearded Inuit's mouth hadn't stopped buzzing since we'd taken off from Iqaluit 3 hours before, and my tolerance for both noises had grown slim. Happily, the end of this ordeal was in sight. The small hamlet Mitimatalik, known as Pond Inlet, which we were rocking and tilting down towards. From this vantage point, and in this dawn-greeting, sleet-spitting weather, the village at the northernmost tip of Baffin Island appeared little more than a shadowy cluster of shacks dwarfed by glaciers in the distance. It looked every bit the town at the end of the world it was, and exactly the kind of place you'd find someone like her. "I'm just saying," the pilot continued, having received approval to land. "I get it, the dating world's tough, but coming all the way to Mitimatalik for a woman? All she wants is a ticket out of this dump. No amount of hot flesh on a cold night is worth being taken for a ride." I forced another smile, though my lips were resistant, watching the landing strip lights glow brighter. "Like I said, she's got a wonderful personality," I said, for the 15th time. "You don't have to worry. Not everyone's a scammer, spoken like a love-struck fool with more money than sense." The pilot laughed. "Well, I hope it goes okay. At least you've got your return flight booked. I'll be back tomorrow, same time. But if you're not here, with or without your girl, I'll be gone. No refunds." I nodded, staring out at the endless expanse of snow that had become visible as dawn broke. Calling it dawn at 10 to noon seemed wrong, but that's what it was this time of year, during Nunavut's polar night, when the sun barely rose above the horizon, and daylight, more twilight, didn't last long. A 1 to 2 hour period of faint light that quickly retreated to darkness. It suited me fine, because it suited Kaala, December 5th. The body of 35-year-old Naki Pakta is discovered in Rankin Inlet, Kivalik, having bled out from multiple stab wounds. The nature of the injuries is baffling. The star-shaped structure of the wounds suggests they were inflicted from within. No murder weapon is found. No persons of interest are identified. Naki is found in a remote area outside the town, half buried in a mat of Arctic heather. Kaala wasn't my online girlfriend, or the catfish the pilot suspected. That was a convenient lie. This time tomorrow, He'd either laugh at me or pat me on the back, depending on how things went. Both eventualities were covered. The plane convulsed as we landed, tires skidding briefly before finding their grip. Then we came to a halt at the terminal, a corrugated outhouse set against a dull, hazy backdrop. "Here we are," he said, grinning through his beard. "Good luck with your woman. You'll need it." I thanked him and disembarked with backpack and camera. The biting cold stabbed me, but I didn't flinch. I inhaled sharply, the icy air burning my lungs, and made my way deeper into the ghost-like outpost of swirling snowflakes, the most remote place I'd ever come to meet a subject. Beyond the airstrip, the snow-covered streets of Mitimatalik were deserted. Dim street lamps illuminated squat, weather-beaten buildings, wide-eyed structures that seemed to huddle together to keep warm and endure the endless night, which had introduced insomnia, sleep paralysis, and nightmares to their eaves. December 10th. Aputi Kanuk, 38, is discovered in his pickup in Whale Cove. The insides of the cab are painted red. Police are baffled. The Inuit sports hundreds of wounds, pinpricks that seem to have punctured the flesh from within. There is nothing untoward in the vehicle, just some strands of heather in the footwell. I passed residences with lights glowing in windows, stores hibernating like frost-covered monuments, and vehicles remade as ice sculptures. I didn't pass people, even though it was midday and as bright as it was going to be for another 24 hours. Nobody was getting their steps in. But that's not to say no one was out. As the snowfall grew thicker and I approached a junction in the road, laughter reached my ears from my destination, Ukpik Tavern, where, according to Sigil, the woman I was seeking should be. A few more steps, and it materialized. A nondescript bar that doubled as a restaurant, dull light spilling through the window. A wooden sign above the door creaked as I pushed through. Inside, I took a moment to shake off the cold and the snow before making my way to a table. The bar was decorated simply, with wooden tables and chairs, and a fireplace burning thick logs. A handful of locals were seated, meeting friends for lunch during this nighttime reprieve. They eyed me with mild suspicion as I came in. I made a show of checking my camera and placing it on the table like it was sacred. They looked away. Just another rich tourist or hipster blogger come to photograph the northern lights. Boring. A barman with a ducktail beard that somehow looked better than mine sauntered over as I shrugged off my parka. He informed me the bar was closing at 1:30, an hour and a bit from now. He noted my Nikon and the guidebook for neighboring Bylot Island I'd placed on the table. He didn't ask why I was here. I ordered beer and a bowl of caribou stew, then settled down to warm myself and wait. I didn't have to wait long. She came out of the men's room, carrying a mop and bucket, head high as she went behind the bar. The information I'd received had been correct. Not that I doubted it. Sigil was always correct. And though she looked older than 40 and heavier than 180 pounds, she was recognizable as the person who'd been described. Her face was weather-beaten. Strands of gray threaded her braided hair, and the birthmark on her neck was visible above the folds of her jumper. It was her, December 15th. Panic spreads through the Kivalik region as a third body is found. The frozen corpse of Nuvuk Kayuk, 42, is discovered at the foot of a cliff in Chesterfield. It seems he may be the victim of a fall, until he is thawed out and the stab wounds appear. Multiple star-shaped incisions that confirm murder, but there are no clues to be found, except the cluster of heather in his grasp. I received my glass of amber liquid and bowl of meat and veg, which I ate and drank slowly, watching her interact with the locals. She had an infectious laugh and a warm voice. I gathered she'd worked here a while. She seemed kind, not like one who could hurt another. But appearances are deceptive. I knew that better than most. Time crawled as I finished eating. Every so often she'd look in my direction, flash a smile or nod, and I'd look away. I didn't need to make a connection. Not yet. Shortly after 1:15, the locals started getting up to leave. I drained my glass and pulled on my coat. It had been a successful visit. I'd found who I was looking for and gotten a feel for her form. Despite her slight bulk, there was no question she could handle herself. Behind the smiles and laughs, she could wield violence. I paid my bill and left. Outside, it was already black, the brief daylight hours having retreated. The snowfall had ceased, as if scared back into hiding by the night. Pond Inlet was silent, except for the now muted voices of the locals, who slunk out of the tavern behind me, showing less than zero interest in this photo-hunting fool. Stepping onto the stoop of what appeared to be a post office, I took cover in the shadows and fished out my vape. Blood, orange, and charcoal. My flavor of choice. Enough bite to keep me alert, though, of course, I had Sigil for that. And as if on cue, to remind or reprimand me, a sudden cackle of noise penetrated my ear, making me wince as I cupped it. It was a garbled message, like always, broken syllables that were difficult to understand, but whose meaning was clear. I was on the right track, and things were escalating. Kaala was about to strike again. December 21st. The remote community of Arctic Bay, Qikiqtaaluk, is shaken by the discovery of Panaa Pictu, 39, found dead while camping on the outskirts of town. Her body, exsanguinated, sports familiar stab wounds. A charred stem of heather is found in her campfire's ashes. 4 Inuit are dead, killed in mysterious fashion. The killer remains at large. I'd taken the 3rd pull on my vape when the bar door opened and my target stepped out, wrapped in a sealskin coat. I couldn't see her face, but I knew from her gait it was her. She didn't waste time, stomping off towards the far end of town, where the street lamps petered out and darkness reigned. I gave her a minute's head start. The snow would record her path. She wasn't expecting me, so she wouldn't try to give me the slip. I took another drag and waited for the barman to lock up before setting off. I activated my Nikon's night vision function and kept an eye on its view screen as I followed her tracks. The buildings thinned out as I left town until there was nothing left but rocks and snow. Somewhere ahead was a forest, but I couldn't make it out. What I could make out was a flat, oblong structure surrounded by a chain link fence. I didn't know what the building was, but the footprints led to it. So that's where I went. A hole had been cut in the fence, spliced wires bent back. I ducked to slip through the gap, careful not to snag my Canada Goose parka, then slunk through the snow to the building. What I could now guess was some kind of supply station. It was abandoned, at least for the winter, but its door had been forced to admit 1 guest. 2, as I eased it open. 3, if Kaala's trap had already been set. I winced in anticipation of a squeal. It didn't come, and I was able to enter a cluttered office lit by a battery-powered lantern. Empty crates and barrels filled the space. Paperwork lay scattered on the floor. In one corner was a sleeping bag, a rucksack, and a small heater. A seal skin coat lay next to the heater, which had been plugged in and was starting to glow. Clever. This wasn't her home. She was using this place as a lure. A crash and a yell brought my eyes to the door behind a dusty reception, and I started towards it, depositing my camera on the desk. Thought you could sneak up on me, eh? Thought you could take me like the others? A thud, a cry, a slam. I reached the door, which was slightly ajar, and peered through. I knew you'd find me, you bitch. But guess what? I got ready. In my ear, Sigil was humming, spitting instructions in urgent, guttural tones. I winced and ignored. I knew what to do. Like Twinak Itukalak, I was ready. So I pulled open the door and stepped through. It was a large storage area, illuminated by more lanterns on aluminium shelving units that had been rearranged haphazardly. The shelves which were presumably used to store produce in normal times, now displayed nothing but flowers, lots of flowers, potted and in full bloom, which was odd because of the season and because of what Sigil told me to bring. Killed Nuvuk, killed Panna. Now I'll kill you. For real this time. The words accompanied more thumps and cries, and then something else, an unnatural keening. I peered around one of the shelving units and found the source of the noise. Jovial, happy Twinak from the bar, straddling the Inuit Kaala, slamming her head against the floor as she tried to sing a song. A window on the opposite wall was up. That's how Kaala had entered. Seeing the flowers would have made her feel safe, given her confidence, inspired bravado. Of course, that's how Twinak had made ready. A second glance at the nearest flower confirmed it. All the potted plants in here were plastic. Shut up, witch. There's nothing here you can use. Twinak slammed Kaala's head harder. The dark-haired, younger woman's words faltered, but she quickly resumed her bird-like song, an eerie, chirping sound that made me shiver. Twinak's back was to me. Kaala's eyes found me as I shucked off my bag. She was surprised, but didn't react. I could see in her eyes she was broken. I could see in her face she was weak. She'd been trekking for weeks, through darkness, making her way up from Tukik, stopping at townships on the way. This was her last stop, but she was tired, hungry. The net was closing in, and she'd underestimated the last of her prey. I'd come to help. Hey, I said, startling Twinak as I unzipped my bag. Haven't you hurt her enough? Who the fuck? Your turn. I removed a potted plant of Arctic heather, real, not plastic, from my bag and put it on the floor, then kicked it towards the barmaid with my foot. Twinak's eyes went wide. Kaala's fluttered shut, but her cracked lips continued to warble. Stop, Twinak spat, falling away from the plant. I watched as its leaves began to tremble in response to the quickening of Kaala's song. In my time and profession, in the circles I traveled, and amongst the fiends I called my crew, I'd seen my share of weird shit. But I'd never seen anything like this. I'd never known an animist, someone who could control earthy matter with their voice. So this was one for the books. Kaala's eyes snapped open, and as she started to sing, shout her words, the plant reacted. Its stems lengthened, stretching toward Twinak like snakes. The soft leaves twisted and hardened, curling into deadly thorns. The petals flared, exposing a dark, pulsing core. Twinak tried to flee, but the heather was fast. Thorny stems wrapped around her limbs, pulling her down. The more she struggled, the tighter they constricted. Kaala sat up and sang louder, and the heather responded. Vines forced their way into Tuinok's mouth, grew down her throat, muffling her screams as they choked her. I watched as she convulsed, thorns punching out through her throat. She squeezed her eyes shut against probing stems, but that was the least of her worries. I couldn't see what was happening inside her clothes, but the pool of blood seeping out from under her back told the tale. I stood there and watched for several minutes until she stopped moving and Kaala fell silent, her animist hymn at an end. She collapsed in a heap, fully spent. I went to her, sat behind her, eased her close. She didn't object. She didn't fear me. It was always the way. They could trust me. They knew. I wasn't there to harm them or turn them in. It was the aura of Sigil. They knew I was only there to help as blood-covered stems of heather slid from Tuinok's mouth. Thorns returned to leaves and petals drooped. I cradled Kaala in my arms. "It's okay," I said, allowing a slug-like tentacle to exit my ear. "My name is Bertram Belasco. I was alerted to your existence when you took your third victim. I run a network dedicated to supporting people like you. Serial killers, for want of a better term. The Mounties haven't pieced things together, but they'll find you. I can get you out. I have a passport for you in my bag, and flights are booked. I can take you to the States. But you have to agree. Do you agree, Kaala Piak? Will you join my network and kill for me?" Sometimes they thought about it, weighed the pros and cons, took time to make sure I was legit. Kaala didn't. She was in no state, and she didn't care. She simply nodded, eyelids flickering. It's all Sigil needed. It wriggled its tentacle to her throat, slid out a proboscis, and stabbed her. For a moment, Kaala's eyes widened in shock. Then, as quickly as it had struck, the tentacle retracted and slunk back inside my ear, having deposited a small lump of matter under her skin, coating her, making her his, ours, a member of the SK network, in which, as an animist, she'd excel. The world was going to become that bit more deadly, and the craving my master had would be fulfilled. November 28th. The peaceful life of Kaala Piak comes to an end when 5 friends visit her guest house in Tukik. Initially friendly, their true intentions emerge when they reveal they've seen a video online. Footage secretly recorded by a hiker showing Kaala performing animism. Desperate to create a viral video, they pressure her to perform and make them famous. She refuses, and the confrontation turns dark. Threatened with violence, Kaala reveals the Eskimo magic she was born with, using a houseplant in self-defense. It starts to strangle Nuvuk. His friends hit her over the head to stop the act. Panicked, thinking her dead, they throw her from a cliff to hide their crime. Kaala awakes mid-fall and sings for help. Arctic heather at the base of the cliff answers the call. Her animism, now tainted, has a taste for revenge, and she has the names of 5 who can satisfy it. O Mother, please send my father across. It was all a dream. Merle's breath like rotten fish on top of her tongue. The balled-up, gray, dead mass of it settled at the back of her throat, like stale phlegm. His beady, stained tongue wriggling around on top of her tongue. His hand under her blouse, fumbling, scratching. His nails yellow and black and green, the sight of which made her vomit. His puss-filled, bandaged hand on top of her breast, the nail digging into her nipple, the dirt in his nails mixing with her blood. In her blood, the blood cool in the thick heat of the dark room, sweet, mixing with the scent of the vomit dried on the floor. She had dreamt it in the night, writhing like a dying fish, a pool of yellow sweat, unable to scream for all the phlegm in her throat, the fat tongue in her mouth, the eyes in the window. The eyes were from a long ago dream, black, a darkness darker than the black heat of the room, a self-eating darkness, turning inwards, 2 holes in the dark, like the memory of the snake's fangs on Amma's black skin. 2 eyes watching her, watching itself. 2 eyes, like holes in the heat. She could slip away, like vapor, like smoke, like the silver mist over the river. The river, black in the night, black and shining, winking like the silt around it, silver and loose, a million glinting eyes winking in the black night, the air ripe with the sour promise of raw mangoes, teasing and winking from the branches. Among them, the glinting brown eyes, cat-like of Muna, sitting on the branch naked, his long, cat-like body shining fluorescent, blue and violet, in the dark night. Ladki, he whispered to her, want a mango? His words tinged with the stale scent of a biedi, fishy. In the river, there were fishes as small as a dot, dark and invisible, holes in the river, moving eyes. The big fish did not swim. They stared at her, their mouths sending a bubble up the surface of the water, which burst with a quiet pop, waiting for her answer. Pop, 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 Munia, she asked. Not ripe yet, Muna said, and laughed, revealing a scurvy mouth with wiggling teeth, like maggots. With each shake of the shoulder, a ha up and a he down, the teeth dropped down, raining, raining like mangoes, too impatient, too ripe and restless, dropping with a pop, pop, pop as they dropped and popped down. The night black rats gathered them up and scuttled away. An undulating, shadowy tide, whispering, an underground, mousy susurrus, like the restrained gossip, sisak, sisak, of the leaves in the night wind, conspiring. Amma had said it was rubbish, that the aam tree was spiritless, spirits having no cravings for the mango. It was all make-believe, just whispers, conspiring. But this changed when she saw Muna's body, the penis chopped off, dangling from the tree. And now he was sitting beside it, kicking it absent-mindedly once in a while, so that it went swinging, a Sawan swing scene. Munia began to sing now, bellowing in the night, quiet. Amma, mere baba ko bhejori, ki Sawan aya. Mother, please send my father across. Now the rains have come. And with her voice, the rains came down, quiet at first, trickling down her forehead, down her back, like sweat, mixing with the sweat into a vaporous headache. But soon, as Munia's bellowing grew more hysterical, stretched and cracked, the rain gained violence, sheets after sheets crashing down on the earth. Dum-dum-dum, da-dum, da-dum-dum. There was no song in this rain, nothing sacred, no rhythm, no melody. It was the roar of primeval war drums, the shanknad breaking out of the sky's raging core, bloodthirsty, furious. The mango trees were screaming in anguish as their branches convulsed, epileptic, suicidal, wanting to break free. But the roots unyielding, circling tighter and tighter around their ankles, cutting off the blood, then cutting into the skin, circling tighter and tighter till they were bleeding. They were bleeding and screaming, their blood washed out by the rain. The earth was bleeding, pools of blood, pools of filth running down the mango grove, running down the fields, running down the streets, running down to the river, running down. She looked at Muna, hanging on to the branch, swinging in the rain, the noose getting tighter and tighter, choking, screaming out into the rain. Amma, mere baya ko bejori. She knew that the flow of the dream, the black river, with the pop-pop fish, with the mango carcasses, with the winking stars in its belligerent waters, was running down to the void, the shunya that was inside her, the void that she was made to cover with her sari and petticoat, her red bangles and black bindi, the red dye on her feet, and the toe rings which cut into her skin, the shunya that was a red field, with Amma's corpse lying among the bent-down barley, the teeth-girdled void inside her stomach, as she watched her running towards the mango grove in her shit-stained sari, the blouse torn off, running to the branch that was no longer weighed down by Muna's incomplete body, the void that no Baba, no Pai, no Mama could cross, a bottomless pit. What could Sawan do? The Shunya spelled out by the noose around Muna's neck. The Shunya Murli was trying to prod with his puss-filled fingers and his puss-filled organ. The Shunya that was a dream, the void that was this dream that was a void, flowing, rushing down into the night, to where the black river came to a halt at the dried-up vomit puddle, out of which she emerged into the dark room once again. Her body felt slimy, putrid, a mix of semi-digested rice, sweat, and the rotten substance of death. Murli's hands pressed tight around her neck, and her neck gave away, turning to sludge. Murli bent down and licked it up, his tongue abrasive, spiky, leaving scars for flies to lay their eggs on. Her breath started to go, and she could hear the thrashing of her heart in her ear, but she repeated to the beat of her thumping heart, "It is all a dream. A dream, a dream." It was all a dream. But it wasn't hers alone. It also belonged to Amma. It was a dream passed on to her, the only dowry Amma could muster, her inheritance. The dream belonged to Muna too. It was the dream that Amma spun out in the thick heat of the dark room, spinning and spinning. The thread of her word laced with her saliva, the strings of saliva that would purse her lips as she kept mumbling in the dark, spinning, her words indecipherable, a chant, a plea crying out into the night. Muna, Muna Munia Munia. It was the dream that Amma had spun out in the dark night, as the man whom they never called Baba filled the air of the room, humid with his sweaty appetite, heavy with his piggish grunts, filled it with the scent of his beedi, which would make Munia sick, filled it with the sight of gray tufts of hair pushing out of his ears, filled it with a heaviness that sat in their stomachs for days, stones in their chests, gray, a shame that stalked them and enwrapped them, entered their bodies, evacuated their innards, rendered their guts hollow, an all-consuming parasite, till they were all sludge, putrid and shameful, wobbly and shapeless, shadows, shunya, the dream that rose above this scent, these sounds, this heaviness, a light, weightless dream that her eyes caught a glimpse of as she had stood there watching, her two eyes glinting in the window. Outside the window, Munaya and her counting the teeth that they had found this week, buried in the silt around the river, buried in the sand like shells, hollow, heavy with the weight of their own insouciance, their own lack, a self-inflicted negligence dropping out of mouths and scuttering around in the sand. Sometimes they found worms inside them, pink and white and sometimes green. They compared the shapes that they found. Munia claiming her finds to be sharper, while she rubbed hers against her thumb till it turned raw, certain of their supremacy. Sometimes she kept them in her mouth, swirled them around, the taste of dirt, metallic, sour. She sucked at them, like at the stone of the Jaman. Now, Merle's teeth shifted around in her mouth, scuttling down her tongue into her throat, tasting of gutka and anger, scuttling down her body, digging, puncturing the skin, searching for the arteries. A group of 3 scuttled down and lodged into her vagina. And all she could think of was the teeth around the river and the necklace of teeth Munia made for Amma, the same necklace which she ate 1 tooth a time after each meal, her self-prescribed medicine. Outside the window, Munia and she were watching her with a gray feeling in the pit of their stomach, as Merle laid claim to each part of her body and signed it off with the mixture of her own blood and his own dirt. Outside the window, Munia and she became 2 eyes, superimposed, simultaneous. One, a palimpsest of dreams and bodies and voids and eyes, melted into one. He and her, she and him, her and her, peering in at her mother and her mother, dreaming, drifting out of the window through the holes their eyes burned through the darkness, peering in at herself, the dream of I, Amma, Munia, breathing in the dark. Our bellies swell out in a rhythm, up, down, up, down. Munia is not Muna now. She won't be Muna again till morning. When morning comes, she will have to leave herself beside me, wrapped up neatly on the pillow. Leave this dream that Amma has spun for us and cross the shore. But it is still night now. Amma is telling us the story of a king who lost all his kingdom, all of whose children died at his own hand by some cruel accident of fate, all of whose wives died of grief, all of whose citizens died of the plague, and all of whose army died at war. Now, what could such a man do in this world? He wandered around the ghost of his kingdom, dreaming. Munaya and I do not believe this story. We contend that such a man should die, would die. And can't death be a dream? Amma asks. I wake up. Merle is shaking. he is done. He turns around and goes off to sleep. I look out of the window. The sun has started to come up. I repeat to myself, it is all a dream, a dream, a dream. Never let it be said. A king does as he pleases, and anyone who disagrees is a fool. Wolsey, my Lord Chancellor, who the Pope made cardinal, erred in being too slow to deal with the king's great matter, which was how the need to legitimately free myself from my first marriage became known. Thomas More, who I promoted to the same position, forfeited his life when he put conscience before obedience to the crown. When Thomas refused to take the oath of succession and denied I was the supreme head of the Church of England, it was only a matter of time. Both men lost their lives, one before he could be tried and beheaded, and one who actually was. I was sad about More's death because I learned much from our religious debates. Until things took a turn for the worse, I enjoyed our little spars. He must have known I had no choice but to have him executed for his treachery, although I showed mercy by transmuting the manner of his execution to beheading rather than the hanging, drawing, and quartering of his parts, which is the standard punishment for treason. I dream of him sometimes in the dead of night, but that is inevitable with someone who was once a friend. Never let it be said, I haven't been a just king. At first, Anne Boleyn was my dream girl. Beautiful, vivacious, and intelligent. She was going to give me everything I desired. I knew she would satisfy me in bed, but I also hoped to confide in her and assumed she'd continue to support my interests. Above all else, I needed her to provide me with a legitimate male heir. In return, she would be my queen, gain undreamed of riches, and her family would be given lifelong prestige. Loving her was a kind of madness. I was such a pitiful wretch. I actually trembled in her presence. She must have wanted me, but her refusal to yield and become my mistress made me crave her all the more. She was the only woman who denied me, and it spurred me on. I was crazy for her sweet, pert breasts. I called them my doxies. My soul drowned in her bright eyes, and at every opportunity, I would try to kiss that fine gazelle-like neck, even when she perkily brushed me away and said, "No, the queen might see and be upset." Anne created a stir everywhere she went. Her alluring voice and elegant French ways were the talk of the court. She'd first been sent to Brussels, then to the French court, by her father for 7 years, and returned a true daughter of the Renaissance. She had an air about her quite unlike other ladies of my acquaintance. I knew if I stalked this enchanting creature long enough, I'd win my prize. Later, when we were together, she joked she'd had no choice in marrying me. It was boldly devilish coming out with something like that, and I laughed heartily at her archness. She further shocked me by saying I'd pestered her by bombarding her with letters and gifts when she withdrew from court for a year. Could she have been trying to escape my advances? Not possible. It was just another ploy. One of her schemes, which had playing into her hands. And it worked. It made me all the more determined to catch her, like Jacob, who had to serve Laban 7 years for his daughter Rachel, and then was tricked into marrying his older daughter Leah. I had to wait 7 years before I could marry Anne. We slept together a little before marriage, but only when the marriage was certain. Divorce from my first wife, Catherine, should have been straightforward, but for political reasons, the Pope refused to grant me one. I grew increasingly desperate. I certainly could never have imagined the trials and tribulations that lay ahead as I fought to marry my dream woman. The very fabric of my country's religious landscape was being altered as a result of the reforms I made. I could not turn back. Although Anne had been the maid of honor to my first queen, I did not let that deter me. I can hardly believe I once loved Catherine and did my best to comfort her in her miscarriages. It was only after years of failing to provide me with a male heir I realized the marriage must have been cursed, and that I'd been wrong to marry my brother Arthur's widow at 17. By marrying Catherine, I had unwittingly uncovered my brother's nakedness. In doing so, I had gone against Scripture. For doesn't it say in Leviticus that if a man marries his brother's wife, they will be childless? Never let it be said, I wasn't a pious king. That being the case, I had no choice but to look elsewhere. In the early days, it was easy to pursue Anne at court. When she emerged from Catherine's bedchamber, I ran after her in the corridors. I ignored Catherine's tearful pleas not to embarrass her in front of courtiers by flirting openly with her maid of honor. As far as I was concerned, our marriage was over. I had been supremely kind to Catherine in the past, but my patience had long worn a beard. Never let it be said, I was not a tender-hearted king. Shortly after this, Anne retired from her position as maid of honor and retreated to her family home at Hever. Distance is no barrier to a lover's heart, and I deluged her with letters and gifts. I was amazed when she kept sending them back, possibly out of a sense of misguided propriety. I couldn't believe it. Most women would have been falling over themselves for half the attention. Anne's sister had happily given herself to me in the past, even if it had ruined her reputation. I knew Anne couldn't resist forever, and my need grew so urgent, I even told the court I couldn't manage without seeing her. I camped nearby at a friend's house and besieged her daily. By the time she consented to marry me, they had long been calling her the Great Homewrecker and the Great Whore, an accusation that no longer appears as unjust as it once did. I don't know what I was expecting. But not long after I had Anne, the craving stopped. It was as if all the fire of passion that had driven me had been extinguished. She was better than her sister, who just lay there like a sack of potatoes while I took her. But really, no different to any other woman in that way. Perhaps, after waiting for so long to achieve my goal, I had grown bored. Now she was mine. There was no need to chase. By her second pregnancy, my eyes started wandering a little. But after all I'd gone through to make her my queen, I could hardly rid myself of her without just cause. For a while, she became more compliant, and we had a few months of happiness. I decided I would bide my time, but when she miscarried again, I could hardly contain my disappointment. The stillborn baby boy lent proof to my doubts. Anne always maintained she miscarried on account of my jousting accident when she'd feared I was going to lose my life. She kept telling me I was never the same after the horse fell on me, and I lay unconscious for 2 hours. Either way, it seemed unlikely she was ever going to be able to give me a son. The fate of my second marriage was now sealed. Ironically, before the miscarriages, Anne had given birth to a healthy girl at Greenwich Palace. At least my daughter looked like me. As Elizabeth was our firstborn, I did my best to cover over the embarrassment, but there were none of the expected bonfires and rejoicings a male birth would have merited. I could almost hear the bawdy remarks in taverns up and down the land. No doubt my predicament was a source of merriment at court. I could read the guilty looks and hated the way the talk dried up as soon I entered a room. Secret, scornful laughter, mocking my failure. Never let it be said I was a king too proud to learn from his mistakes. The strength of character, the witty personality that had once so delighted me, now grated. When I heard Anne laughing with her coterie of male admirers, I felt as if she was insulting my manhood. When she wasn't doing that, she was accosting me about reforming practices, constantly asking whether some of the money from the dissolution of the monasteries could be used to fund places of education. She said I had agreed to this, but I don't recall making such promises. Nothing worse than a meddlesome woman. Who was she to harass me? Once convinced our union was doomed, I could think of nothing but finding a way to get rid of this woman who'd made me a laughingstock in Europe. Though it occupied my every waking hour, I came up with nothing. That was when I turned to my right-hand man to see if he could find a solution. Cromwell has never disappointed me. Yet. Unlike More and Bishop Fisher, who steadfastly refused to accept the new faith to make me head of the church and were destroyed for their treachery. It didn't take long for Cromwell to resolve my problem. He has the most practical turn of mind of any man I've known. He understood My infatuation for Anne had turned to something else. I had become obsessed with the need to rid myself of this burdensome woman. The woman I had once adored now hung about me like a plague. I could hardly bear to breathe in the same air. In his customary style, Cromwell sorted things out, and before long, Anne was escorted to the Tower, where she was charged with having committed adultery with 5 men, one of whom was her brother. It didn't surprise me. The pair of them were always sneaking off in corners and giggling together, no doubt laughing at me behind my back. I could well believe her capable of it, even though she strenuously protested her innocence against every charge brought against her. She claimed she had never once been unfaithful. She had always been true in word and deed to her king. How could I have been so deluded? How could she have betrayed me thus? How could she have lied so? And how could I ever have fallen under her spell? She has been hunted down and will be slaughtered tomorrow, or maybe the next day. I dare say she will be waiting in a high state of dread, not knowing when it will be. I have already been more than magnanimous in acceding to her request for a French swordsman. That way, her end will come swiftly, for she only has a little neck. I consider it a final act of kindness towards a treacherous wife who was once queen. Never let it be said I wasn't a forgiving king. Tomorrow, or the next day, I will wait on Tower Hill for the cannons to announce the witch's death. Then I will turn horse and ride to Hampton Court. I anticipate celebrating with Jane once the deed is done. Jane is not well educated, but she is loving and submissive as a good woman should be, and I plan to marry her soon. I know we will be blessed with a son. I can hardly wait. Blood rain. It wasn't the red aliens that were the problem. It was the voodoo high priests that caused all the mischief. Monkey hands, parrot beaks, and baboon skulls were one thing. But when the blood rains came, all of the usual cons kicked into high gear. The mantis-like, spindly red alien surveyed my vegetables with an air of fascination. He stopped on the okra, holding up a stalk and studying it. He was dressed in ripped whitewashed jeans and a Blink 182 t-shirt. But behind his disguise was a standard silver spandex jumpsuit, like they all wore when they came into town to creep around. Whatever else you could say about the red aliens, they were creepers by nature, with no sense of boundaries. I just wanted him to move along. I clenched a final notice of foreclosure auction in my hand, as if taking out my anger on the paper would save the family ranch. Yahya Gaban took the deed to our ranch in foreclosure. Yahya was a cattle herder, but before that, he had been a TAF general and still had pull with the government. Yahya was hard, implacable, unyielding, a real monster. Yahya once shot and killed a 6-year-old boy playing in his grazing pastures while the child begged for his life. The laws allowed one to protect their land from intruders. When asked why he'd done it, Yahya had said, "The signs on the perimeter say, 'Stay out, trespassers shot on sight.' Wouldn't mean nothing if I didn't follow through." The Police Nacional who had questioned him said, "Yahya, the kid was illiterate. Guess he should have paid more attention in school." Yahya had said. The way Yahya looked at it was, when he set his eye on what's yours, it was his if he could find a way to take it from you. Uncle Kofi was missing an eye from turning the other cheek in a fight as a boy. But the rock in the other kid's hand had landed just right and shot the eyeball clean out. Uncle Kofi was a pacifist who wouldn't even swat a mosquito. So this was no contest. I had told Uncle Kofi we should just give up the ranch. We couldn't afford it. But Uncle Kofi was superstitious. He believed that fate could be wooed. A few weeks earlier, I had gone with Uncle Kofi to the Ako Desawa fetish market and met with Guédinon Benoit, the voodoo man. We entered his office, as he called it, which was a hut with a square-framed doorway lined with human skulls that looked like a no-frills mine shaft leading into a catacomb. The standing air inside was stiff, musky, and moist. The walls of the inner chamber were filled with the dried heads of dogs, monkeys, birds, snakes, and every imaginable living thing you could think of. You could almost hear the animal sounds echo from the clay walls. Uncle Kofi gasped at the abundance of spirits filling this hovel. I did not share his sense of wonder. I joked to myself, internally, that this was the great roadkill emporium of Lomé. "Here it is," Guédinon said, his rounded jowl stubbled with patches of white, and his bald head shining from the torchlight. The basket was filled with little dried chameleons, with their helmet-shaped heads adorned with horns and bony lumps, like modern-day dinosaurs. It smelled like furry jerky, dried in the humid, tropical breeze. Yes, here we are. After putting a handful of chameleons in a basket, Guédinon gathered a handful of dried parrots, each withered down to the size of a famished mouse. "Now, to change your luck, you will grind up the chameleon and grind up the parrot." Guédinon depicted the grinding while he spoke, taking up a pewter bowl and mallet to make the demonstration, the torchlight reflecting off his bald forehead. "You will mix this with soap and bathe yourself in it. Do this 2 times a day. 3 days, not a day more, not a day less." Uncle Kofi tapped Guédinon on the shoulder while he looked for some other nonsense to sell us. "Did you hear about the Dulaba?" You mean about the strangers whose minds could not be read? They were talking about these totems at the village gates by our farm that look like men sitting cross-legged, with arms extruded and heads of black tar, with seashells for eyes. The guardians, or Dulaba, are supposed to be able to scan the minds of foreigners entering the village to discern if they have ill intent. I heard that the Westerners, the lanky ones, who appeared before the blood rains, I heard that none of the priests could discern their purpose from the Duleba. Uncle Coffee said. It is true, Guedenon told him. I wanted to scream. They are red aliens, you moron. No one knows what they want. But I couldn't say anything, or I'd be committed. I was the only one who could see them, ever since I was a child. I had been hiking on Mont Agu, exploring its ridges, when I saw a light in the mist and stumbled upon their cliffside observatory. Normally, it was cloaked, but something about the vapors in the mist had screwed with the effect, did something to the light. When I walked into what looked like a temple from the outside, I saw a screen wrapping around the length of the chamber in a semicircle. Large, spindly red, mantis-like creatures with 4 legs on their hind parts were engrossed in the readings and images on their screens, tapping away with long, bony fingers on the consoles in front of them. One of them turned its hooded eyes and triangular face in my direction and screamed, the pincers on the sides of its mouth flaring in fright. A group of them rushed toward me. I shielded my face, but they were not violent. That was when they gave me the scarab beetle amulet that allowed me to recognize them despite their cloaking tech, and explained to me about the bright blue marble we inhabit. They said, "It is not that Earth is special. There are plenty of habitable worlds with natural wonders. It is the size of the moon that counts. Our mission is to scan the cosmos to find other worlds that can host life. Other worlds with just the right size of moon." I had pressed the aliens as to why this was the case, and they had elaborated and explained everything in great detail. But I couldn't understand much of it. The only worlds that host life are those worlds with a moon that is just the right size to create a total solar eclipse, one of the red aliens said. And once that sacred syzygy goes out of balance, or is disrupted, life moves on. I had asked why they didn't just place moons around any planets with the right characteristics. He said, "There is a directive against playing God. Each civilization rises and falls on its own merits. When the time comes, a people either mature and venture out from their home, or are snuffed out." It sounded dramatic back then, but these days, I don't know that a fair judge would deem us worthy of salvation, least of all us Togolese, who were forever finding reasons to kill and brutalize one another. The red aliens come from a sad, timeless dimension, much like Togo. On their world, there are tiny microbes in the soil that cover everything in shades of red. The microbes are in the air, the soil, the water, and can lay dormant for centuries, which is what is causing the blood rains. So much of this stuff is filtered out of the observatory that when they are here, they are literally pumping red dye into the clouds, day in and day out. In Togo, the next calamity is always waiting right around the corner, and word travels fast in Lomé. To stir people into a panic only takes the smallest of rumors. Strange lights flashing around Mont Agu. Tall, spindly men in strange clothing loitering in the market. Match that up with omens like blood rain and a lunar eclipse, and the entire populace was stewing with anxiety and murmuring up a storm. Especially Uncle Coffee. It was great for the priests. But you know what terror and intrigue is bad for? Selling vegetables and fattening cows, and for all of the divination and soothsaying about how the bloodshed of decades gone by would be punished unless the land was purified. How those cries reaching to heaven would compel the Almighty to blot out the sun. Despite all of that, all this voodoo accomplished was to tear into old wounds and inspire fresh political violence. Everyone in the suburban villages and the slums blamed someone for their troubles and sought protection or aid from the priests. The radicals blamed the Union Party and the rich Kabyé tribe for subjugating the masses and censoring speech. For this and for that, and prayed for their downfall. The Union Party blamed the radicals for deceiving the public with lies and doubled down on censorship. And the disputes were much the same in the suburbs. Each side thought the other evil. Each side saw the issue as one-sided, good versus evil. In a way, each side was right, and each side was wrong. And our people, splintered in 1,000 factions, with no unifying principle, pointed fingers at each other, much the same as our governors did, and old feuds spilled out into bloodshed. And Yahya had sent a man to tell Uncle Kofi he'd be coming to the ranch the next day, and it was time we cleared out. I gripped the crumpled notice in a tight fist and looked up at the stranger. The red alien at my vegetable stall in the Lomé Grand Market grabbed one of my best okra plants and gave it a once-over, not knowing I could see through his disguise. "How much for one of these?" he asked in French. "Why are you here?" "I am looking for vegetables to thicken a stew." "Cut the shit," I said. "We've been having blood rain for the past 2 months. The red alien laughed heartily. "It's just from dust kicked up into the atmosphere from a dust storm. For 2 months? Dust doesn't take 2 months to settle. Maybe it is some kind of algae, like a red tide. It stained all my white clothes. It burned the leaves off the trees. People are using it to tattoo skin. What do you think it is? I know what it is. Red alien bugs. What else? His buggy eyes bulged, and his forehead furrowed. Then he settled into realization. You're her. You're Dora Igwe. Dora the Explorer. The one who found us in the flesh. Do you want to come watch the eclipse with us? Why would I do that? It is an important celestial event. No disrespect. But it gets dark once a day. It's called night. I really don't get the novelty. You wouldn't, would you? I guess it's like the suddenness of the enveloping darkness. It is metaphorical. Sometimes, you know, it is later than you think. What's that supposed to mean? You know, your people believe that war and bloodshed are like a virus, that it infects even the sun and the moon. And when the sun and moon get to quarreling, that brings about the eclipse, a final warning to change your ways. Those are just Batamaliba folk stories. They say the first mothers, Puka Puka and Kuyekok, told the villagers that the darkening of the sun was a warning to make amends for old feuds and live in peace, and the light will return. You are a spacefaring team of scientific explorers. You know this is an astrological, mathematical event. It has nothing to do with violence. Don't be so sure, child. There is much you do not understand. As the red alien turned and walked up the long, dusty road to the forest switchbacks, he turned and said, "Come watch with us, if you want." In the observatory, we waited for the eclipse. The red aliens were frantic. The one from earlier, who I'd nicknamed Tommy, took the controls and lifted the ship to a hover. "We've got to find a better vantage point," he said, as the ship floated through the Tongolese countryside outside Lomé. I could feel the eerie shadow chasing us down. The sky was full of fast-moving clouds, and a low mist hung to the valley floor, slinking down the mountain slopes and resting on the fields. The ship came to rest in Yahia's grazing lands, and the moon obstructed the sun. The red aliens gasped with a sound like the whistling of the wind. Like I said, though, I'm not superstitious. The whole thing seemed a bit overblown to me, but there it was, the total eclipse. A black orb with the faintest halo of red, set against a black, overcast, and moonless sky. Tommy turned to another red alien, who I'd known for years, and had nicknamed Freddy, and said, "The satellite has started moving too close. It is only a matter of time now." "Isn't everything?" Freddy asked. "Hey, what is he talking about?" I asked. "Don't you worry, child," Freddy said. "When the time has come, it will all happen very quickly. She doesn't know we are here for the moon," Tommy blurted out. "It is just the right size for the colony in HD 1106-7, Freddy said. Freddy made a gesture to shush him. But it was too late. I had heard it. So, for all our worries about our earthly disputes, this was what the end of the world looked like. At least I wouldn't end up being homeless. That had been the thought I'd been obsessing over for days. I went to look out the back window, and it was just like Freddie had said. It was coming quickly. Yahya was in the cab, rolling the excavator toward the ship, and the dipper and bucket were swinging down and about to crash through the ceiling. The sound was deafening. Shards of metal and other materials rained down. Wires and diodes and mechanical pieces pelted our heads and the ground. The red aliens shrieked. Tommy was holding Freddie like a kid in a theater, caught with an unexpected jump scare. I ran out in the fields, under the dark, moonless sky. Yahya raised the bucket over and over, caving in the roof of the ship and tearing huge chunks of the fuselage out into his fields. Yahya was smoking a Cuban cigar, and I could hear him yelling, "Serves you right, trespassers." I guess a similar thing would happen soon to our ranch house, in the family for 5 generations. Maybe the barn, too. That seemed to be the way of things, to tear down the old to make way for the new. Especially here in Togo. Tommy made it out of the ship, only to be met by the blast of a shotgun. "Got one," Yahya shouted. I just watched, frozen. The blast tore Tommy's torso nearly in half, felling him. The blood poured and oozed out onto the dark fields. The pool of blood was red, just like ours. I guess, however different we are on the outside, maybe all living things bleed red. We are a thirsty bunch, the living hungering after that red nectar, to stir it, to shed it, to pool it, and collect it. Then Yahya turned to me and pointed the shotgun at my face. "Run," he said. "Get off my land." And I ran, through the pitch-dark fields, in the cool of the eclipse, crying as I waited for a gunshot that never came. Yahya yelled after me, "Enjoy your home while you can. I'll be coming for it." And he laughed, a bellowing stomach laugh, an eerie, chortling, bone-chilling laugh, inevitable, unquenchable, soulless. And as I ran, tripping on rocks, legs cut by tall grasses, I saw sirens in the night. At least 12 SUVs, the Gendarmerie Nationales, the National Guard. They were coming for Yahya, alerted by the gunshots and the carnage. A tall, friendly Fed with a pock-marked face jumped out of one of the vehicles and tried to grab me. "It's okay now. We've got this," he said. But I wrestled away from him. As I made it to the clearing and the dirt road, I dared a glance back at the haloed specter of the eclipse. I hoped Uncle Kofi would be back at the kitchen table, waiting for me with some vegetable soup, blissfully impervious to the warring entities ravaging our lands. The blood rains fell in a torrent, coating the dirt road in a river of blood. I guess not all monsters are created equal. Ours take life without reason or remorse, just because they can. A sliver of light emerged from the fading eclipse as I reached the drive to the ranch house, lighting my path, warming the shadows. Uncle Coffee was at the door, the smell of the fetish soap on his skin. "Our luck is changing," he said. Gloria. They liked to share these idyllic, quiet moments in front of the mirrored dressing table, George combing Georgina's hair. It was something soothing, calming, and therapeutic, a necessary and intimate ritual, an important part of their relationship, which they had been doing together since they couldn't remember, certainly since childhood. In complete silence, never a word spoken, Georgina in a catatonic state of mind, completely immobile, a trance-like state. George slowly, softly, gently glides the brush through her long tresses of hair. This quiet ritual went on for hours, quietly, blissful. They were inside a bubble of tranquility. Gloria watched on, grinning from ear to ear, lolling against the chair, propped up with cushions. Gloria had seen it all. Gloria was a gift, a valuable gift of subterfuge for George, a bribe from his parents to keep him quiet, keep his mouth shut, about the secret that must be kept in the family. No one, absolutely no one must know. You know that, George, don't you? His parents would explain to the innocent ears of George. This is Gloria. You can whisper in her ear if you ever want to talk to someone about it. Okay? Gloria became the listener, the therapist. And then she would pass on the secret information to Georgina. Georgina was the stronger of the two, made of rock. Nothing disturbed or frightened Georgina. That's why George doted on Georgina. He knew he was weak. And she was so strong. She possessed the strength for both of them. Gloria was so pleased to be added to the family and to be an integral part of it. The family was wealthy. The father, a world-renowned specialist surgeon from a wealthy legacy. He was privileged from birth, nannies, boarding school. His pathway in life was constructed and planned before he was born, from generations prior and generations to come. The tried and trusted way. His marriage was arranged, with only a select few who could be considered a match in their world. In those high circles of society, she was perfect, of similar family status. She didn't lose any of her privileges. It was a perfect transition from her maternal family into her family of marriage. She didn't lose any sleep over the matter. Life continued on as normal. Gatherings, parties, friends. It was seamless. When she became pregnant shortly after the marriage, it made the headlines on the celebrity pages. The joyous ink leapt off the gossip pages. She demanded to be fully anesthetized for the birth. Pain was not a word in her personal experience dictionary. She was completely unaware of the conception, totally out of it. She could have given birth to a horse, and was equally unaware she had delivered twins. Gloria was selected as a gift, a treasure for George. She was token of unspeakable secrets, unfulfilled desires. Her appearance, with her blonde, braided pigtails, gaudy red lips, might have been misconstrued. But George hugged her lovingly from the very first time they met. His parents were incapable of showing affection, demonstrating their love with hugs and kisses, not in the normal sense. It was not accepted in their constrained, unemotional legacy, their upbringing, and it continued in this generational circle of supposedly refined upper-class family and friends. When Gloria arrived, George understood what he was missing. A feeling of unknown nostalgia for simpler circumstances, which he didn't have an inkling about or any comprehension that it existed. Another life, a different life, a life uncomplicated, without the subtle stresses or pressure continuously made by his parents. George always felt vulnerable, awkward, a feeling of an unfinished project in the presence of his parents. On the rare occasions he was allowed into company of his parents' friends, such as cocktail party events or saying farewell at nighttime, George was nervous, uncomfortable. Shyness overcame his speech as he stood dumb and gormlessly in front of the onlooking adults, inspecting George like an alien life form. "Strange boy," they would whisper as he turned his back on leaving the room. George heard the whispers. These overheard comments, like so many others, send him further into his interior cave of solitude and despair. At least George had Gloria to confide in, he always thought, and the thought consoled him. In the eyes of his parents, Gloria's arrival filled a gap. Gloria symbolized a desire for perfection and control over George, which was completely immoral. The family secret must be suppressed at all costs. George was getting older and wiser. Gloria was introduced with the sole intent of keeping the family secret secure. Everybody was aware that George was the weak link in the subterfuge, the conspiracy, the dark secrets of the family. Gloria was the guardian. She was central to it all, and that made her the gatekeeper to the whole incestuous situation. She was the overseer and protector. The only person Gloria confided in was Georgina. Gloria's secret was safe with Georgina. Doing a good job, is he? That's about all he is good for, combing your hair, Gloria said sardonically, without moving her lips like a ventriloquist dummy. George is a sweetie, stupid as an ass, but he is my loving brother, and I will always protect him, even from your foul mouth. Georgina replied defensively. He's so stupid. He can't hear us, or he ignores every word. The truth. He's a lame brain. Gloria continued her verbal attack. You are the smart one, the strong one in this family. Georgina, if it wasn't for you, we would still be in the clutches of those dinosaur parents, the molesting evil creeps. Gloria continued. Don't say a bad word about Mummy and Daddy like that. Shut that vile mouth of yours, Gloria. Georgina was getting agitated now, but George continued the slow grooming strokes, undeterred, and it seemed oblivious to the conversation between Georgina and Gloria. The smooth grooming strokes of brush helped Georgina to keep her temper, remain calm. I won't tell anybody what you did. Don't worry. Those abusers of innocent children deserved it. Justice was served. Only you. Georgina had the balls to do it. George doesn't have what it takes. Never did. He always hid behind you, scared of his own shadow. The stupid one. Gloria continued in her negative tone. I watched on for years as they took you to their bed for their evil desires. For years, Daddy wanted control, his evil desires, his manipulation, his family fun. And she, Mummy, followed, a willing assistant, always pickled in her normal, alcohol-fueled state of mind, anesthetized. She was a lush most of the time. Both were heartless, immoral bastards. I was used like a comfort blanket, a rag doll, to make it seem normal. Those twisted monsters. Whisper in Gloria's ear. Gloria will keep the secrets of the night. Gloria will make any pain go away. Tell Gloria, but don't tell anybody else. Gloria mimicked the parents' words to their sexually molested victim. They deserved what was coming. George dropped the hairbrush and went to Gloria and started hugging her, whispering in her ear. What did he say? Asked Georgina. He says he loves me. And will I forgive him? Will I forgive him for his weaknesses? Gloria replied. Always the same. He's that stupid. He thinks it's his fault. Gloria was angry. Don't be too hard on him. We need him to be his normal, complicit self. We need his continued silence. We need him to keep his mouth shut now, more than at any time. These are dangerous times. No slip-ups. We all need to stick together. Otherwise, there will be trouble for us all, including you, Gloria. Understand? Georgina continued to look into the mirror, but her steely eyes and tightly drawn mouth emphasized the words. It was a threat. Don't you trust me, Georgina, to keep your dirty, obscene family secrets locked away in my head? Gloria said in a challenging, teasing manner. She was goading Georgina. Georgina lifted her right hand. Both hands had been hidden from sight, low between her parted legs during the long grooming process. As she lifted the concealed right hand, one could now see she was holding the blade of the 9-inch carving knife, splashed in crimson blood. The blood stood out a dark, dull shade of red against the shiny silver blade of the knife. Slowly, she raised the blade higher and then held it above her head. She held the pose, and slowly turned her upper body and head to face Gloria. Unless you are looking for the same Gloria, I would recommend you keep your mouth shut, as you always have. It was the reason you were ingratiated into this family. Your loyalty has kept you alive and your dirty mouth tolerated. Your circumstances can change fatally if you start to change, my dear Gloria. Georgina glared at Gloria threateningly. Now, let's clean up the mess. They say no bodies, no crime. Frayed Edges, Monday, 6:50 p.m. Sitting hunched over the scratched wooden surface of the desk in the corner of his room. Hideo Nakamura froze mid-brush stroke and stiffened, the hairs on the back of his neck rising up in response to the sudden, inexplicable certainty that he was being watched. He was home alone, had been for days. The house was deathly quiet, and the night was still. He'd been buried so deep in silent concentration while he practiced his kanji that he could have heard a moth flap its wings or a spider scuttle across the floor. Nobody, not a living, breathing soul, could have come down the hall, slid open his door, or entered his room without him noticing. Not a living, breathing soul. And yet, now he spun on his stool, expecting to find one, his breath caught in his throat as he came around and rose, arm up in readiness of defense. Calligraphy brush brandished like a weapon. Nobody was there, but the sensation of being watched didn't leave him. His room was small, just 8 tatami mats in size, and from where he stood to the wardrobe ahead was only a couple of paces. To his right, next to his desk, and flush against the wall, was a thin, uncomfortable mattress, which lay, without a base, flat on the floor. 3 of the bedroom walls, those to his left and right, and the one that held a curtained window behind him, were made of brick and plywood. The one ahead, which separated his room from the corridor, was a 2-panel traditional shoji, a latticework of bamboo in a wooden frame, covered with sheets of translucent paper. The outermost panel was on a track so it could slide, but it was closed now, the way he'd left it after entering the room. A bare bulb dangled from the ceiling, illuminating the room sufficiently. Apart from a few boxes full of textbooks and a rack on which sat some pairs of shoes, there was nothing in the room behind which anything that shouldn't have been there could have hidden. The only place any such thing could have been concealed was inside the wardrobe, which was built into the wall and sealed by another sliding door. It was this door that captured Hideo's attention. A second after he stood, or more specifically, it was the almond-shaped tear in the center-most paper panel, and the blackness beyond that his eyes came to rest on. The tear had been made a few days prior, when his feet got caught in the blankets as he hopped out of bed, causing him to stumble and plunge his thumb through the delicate paper. Ordinarily, This would have been a cause of concern for Hideo. But with his father away, there had been no need to panic. What his father didn't know couldn't turn him into that wrecking ball of rage Hideo had become all too familiar with since the passing of his mother. So it was a blessing he wasn't there to discover the damage. As minor as it was, it would have pushed him over the edge, the way every slight inconvenience seemed to these days. His father's unpredictability had been growing steadily these past months. Along with his dependency on alcohol, and Hideo could no longer anticipate when or where he might snap. They didn't speak much anymore, not even by text, and he had no idea how long this latest business trip might last. It might be days like the last one, or weeks like the one the time before. Whatever the case, he really did need to find time to repaper that shoji. For all he knew, his father could return that very evening, and that would mean trouble and bruises. If only he could fit it in around studying for his exams, practicing for the upcoming calligraphy contest his school had put him forward for, and training for the baseball league finals. All would be good, or at least as good as it could be. While walking on eggshells, an unexpected flicker of motion in the darkness behind the tear made Hideo jump, and he staggered, bumping into his seat and knocking it over. He didn't know what he'd seen, but he didn't hesitate in dropping his brush and snatching up the wooden stool in panic. Turning back towards the wardrobe, he half expected to find the door sliding open, or something hideous wriggling out through the hole. Instead, he found there was no longer darkness behind the tear, and he thought he could see the sleeve of his jacket. He creased his brow and took a step closer, squinting to peer through the hole. Yes, that was it. His white and blue baseball jacket, hanging where it always hung, in silence. And with that realization, he no longer felt he was being watched. Just my imagination, he thought, lowering the stool to the floor and catching his breath. Studying too hard, too much time alone in this empty house. Whatever he'd felt, whatever he'd thought, it was just a con of the senses. His mind playing tricks, telling him it was time to take a break. Deciding to do just that, Hideo picked up his brush, put it back on the desk, then made his way out of the room, heading down the hall to a lonely kitchen. Tuesday, 5:45 a.m., an hour before his phone alarm blared, he came alert, woken not by hunger pangs, nightmares about his father, or fears of being late for an exam, but by the horrible, goosebump-raising sensation of once again being intensely watched. In the dark, he fumbled on the floor for his phone, snatched it up when he found it, and jabbed it out into the room. The screen lit up with the press of a button, and he scanned it around, searching for anything out of the ordinary. His surroundings were illuminated only slightly, but it was enough for him to see that all looked normal. His door was shut, his curtains drawn. The light bulb dangled darkly. His desk, his stool, his boxes of books, and his shoes. Everything exactly as it should be. His hand stopped moving when the glow from his phone found the tear in the closed wardrobe. Shoji. There was a darkness beyond that was darker than that of his room and seemed to throb. Panic seized his chest, and he jumped up, casting off his blankets and the textbooks he'd fallen asleep with, and stepping forward, free hand searching for a cord above his head, tugging it when he found it to ignite the bulb. "Is somebody there?" he asked, dropping his phone on the mattress and advancing in his shorts towards the wardrobe. "Don't be stupid," he thought. "Of course nobody's there. How could anyone be there? It's just the wardrobe." He was at the door in a second, reaching out with one hand, slipping his fingers around the edge of the panel's wooden frame to slide it open. The light from the bulb rushed in, proving at once what he already knew, that there was nothing to discover within except dangling clothes, the smell of mothballs, and towers of folded blankets on the floor. The darkness, if it had been there to begin with, was gone now. The door had been opened, and Hideo stared in bewilderment. The wardrobe was void of evil, peeping entities, and he no longer sensed any presence. "What is wrong with me?" he wondered, wiping sweat from his brow as he slid the door shut. "Why am I so on edge?" Telling himself it had to be exam stress, performance anxiety, exhaustion, looming deadlines, fear of his father, grief over the loss of his mother, or some kind of mind-warping, paranoia-inducing combination of it all. He slid the door shut and returned to his mattress, switching off the light as he passed beneath it and crawling under the blankets to get more sleep. Wednesday, 7:58 p.m. The second he entered the room, sweaty in his mud-stained baseball uniform, aluminium bat resting lightly on one shoulder, he could sense the presence watching him again. Stopped in his tracks in mid-yawn, he spun to glare at the tear in the brittle square of paper. His ceiling light was on, as he'd left it, and though earlier it had shone into the hole, allowing him a glimpse of the clothes within, all he could see there now was darkness. His face flushed as his eyes probed the black as pitch nothing, which seemed to be staring at him. His blood ran cold, his heart thumped loud, a lump stuck firmly in his throat. "Who's there?" he said, voice trembling, fully convinced now someone was hiding in the wardrobe. "Whoever you are, you better come out. I've a baseball bat, and I'll use it." Not a sound came back in response. Not a whisper. Not a giggle. Not a growl. If it was a ghost, or a demon, or something otherworldly, haunting him, and spying from beyond, it didn't play its tricks to established rules. If it was human, or a thing of flesh and bone, it didn't care a jot it had been rumbled. Maybe it was because he'd just come home from training, and his body was pumped full of adrenaline. Maybe it was because the baseball bat felt powerful in his hands. Maybe it was just that he was sick of being weak and quaking before others like a baby. Whatever it was, Hideo forced down the lump in his throat and strode to the door, slamming it back and stepping through, brandishing his weapon in both hands. As before, there was nothing out of the ordinary to be found, and nothing to be seen other than undisturbed clothes on metal hangers and neatly folded blankets on the floor. He jabbed his bat forward into his shirts, slid them aside, checked every inch of the back wall. There was nothing. There was no one. It was empty. "This doesn't make sense," Hideo said, lowering his bat. He was inside the wardrobe fully, in the space between threshold and clothes. He decided he should examine the torn paper panel from this side, in case there was something he was missing. So he took hold of the sliding door and pulled it shut. Almost at once, a chill seemed to descend, and he felt like he'd entered a vacuum. It could only have been his imagination again, brought on by the uneasiness of the moment. So he forced the notion from his mind and told himself it wasn't as cold as he thought. "Is it you?" he asked, craning his neck to examine the frayed edges of the tear. "Are you mad because I ripped you? Are you trying to drive me insane?" There was no logical thought behind his words. A shoji panel couldn't feel anger, nor did it have the ability to haunt or stare, regardless of how old it might have been. And old it was, which was clear from its brittleness and discoloration. Who knew how many people had slept in this room and used this wardrobe? Who knew what this door might have seen had it only had eyes? Logic didn't seem to factor into the current situation, so Hideo thought nothing of it when it occurred to him the tear did look like an eye, and he suddenly had the urge to peer out through it. Slowly, carefully, he moved his face closer and positioned himself right behind the hole. Squeezing one eye shut, he squinted to see out through it, only to be punched in the gut by the shock of seeing someone on his stool, hunched over his desk, apparently writing. Terrified, Hideo spat the air from his lungs and fell back, dropping to crouch amongst the blankets. What the hell? His mind raced, trying to process what he'd seen. What the hell was that? Starting to question his sanity, and clutching his bat in both hands, he straightened back up and returned his eye to the hole. He had to have been mistaken. He couldn't have seen what he thought. It was impossible as the fact it was now somehow dark inside the room. Someone had switched off the light. The The person who'd been sitting on his stool? He couldn't see much, but he could tell right away that person was gone. He could make out shapes in the darkness, like the stool and the desk and the mattress lying flat against the wall. There was something else, too. A large mound on the bed. And just as he realized what that was, a light blessed into life. A rectangular light he knew came from a phone. He was frozen, captivated by what he saw, unable to look away. He watched the rectangle of light rise and bob around the room like a ghostly lantern. He knew, before it happened, the ceiling light was going to come on, like he knew who'd be beneath it when it did. "Is somebody there?" he saw himself ask, before jerking his head away and shuffling back, burying himself deep in shirts and jackets. "No, no, no, no!" he panicked, pressing himself back against the wall and clutching the bat to his chest. Eyes shut. He thought he heard the familiar swooshing sound of the shoji door opening. Impossible, he thought, squeezing his eyes so tightly shut he felt that they would burst. This isn't real. This isn't real. It can't be. Swoosh. Again. Then bang. And his eyes jerked open. Had the door opened and closed? Had someone peered inside? No. I'm imagining it. This can't be happening. It can't. The first time he'd felt like he was being watched, he'd been sitting at his desk drawing kanji. The second time he'd felt it, he'd been lying in bed, disturbed from a restless slumber. The third time had been just a few minutes before, when he'd entered his room and sensed the presence. And what had he done then, as completely immersed in this nightmare as he was? Hideo didn't believe the door would open again until it did. Nor did he believe a version of himself, a doppelganger, a demon, would step across the threshold and enter the wardrobe. But it did. It was dressed like him. It carried a baseball bat like him. It was dirty from sliding in mud like him. But it wasn't him, because he was there, shrinking back into the corner, watching it prod its bat into the clothes to sweep them aside. Steel hangers screeched along a tarnished metal rail, like witches shrieking, and the noise cut right to his core. Just a minute ago, he'd done the same thing, examining the back of the wardrobe and finding nothing. This one wouldn't come away so empty-handed. This one was going to find him. And with that thought, that fear, that panic-inducing, life-threatening realization, Hideo acted. The scream surged from the depths of his being, and he pushed himself up and lunged forward, swinging his bat as he did, striking the shocked-looking doppelganger square in the face and knocking it out of the wardrobe. He didn't stop. The adrenaline coursing through his veins was electrifying. It made his body burn and flooded him with rage. This was a fight for survival, a battle to retain his place in the world, to protect his identity. And he couldn't let this phony Hideo hurt him, and so he hit it as it fell to the floor, again and again on the head, pounding it into submission, pummeling it brutally until the feeble, desperate cries it made fell silent, and its spasming, copycat limbs lay deathly still. He stood over it then, panting, wheezing, sweat dripping off his brow, blood dripping off his bat. He stared at the demon's battered face, found he was unable to focus on it, didn't want to. Instead, he examined the blood splatter that decorated the tatami mats around it. The patterns looked like kanji characters painted in thick, red ink. "Hideo, I'm home. Come say hello to your father." The shout that seemed to come from the kitchen at the bottom of the hall startled him, and he jerked his head to stare at the bedroom door. His father was home? Since when? He hadn't heard him enter. Had he been there all along? If so, what had he heard? And what would he say about the torn paper shoji, let alone the monster on the floor, wincing, afraid to see the mess he'd made, and the demon's caved-in face? He looked back down. There was nothing there. No doppelganger, no splatter, no kanji characters sketched in crimson blood. "Hideo, get your ass out here, boy!" Confused, panicked, Hideo caught a glimpse of his reflection in the shiny, polished surface of his bat, and shuddered when he didn't recognize it. It was his face. Of that, there was no doubt. But something was different. Something had changed. Something seemed missing from his eyes. That's when he noticed the bat wasn't covered in blood, but he knew that it could be. "I'm hungry, Hideo. Come and cook something. Don't make me go in and get you. There's no food in the house," he muttered, too quiet to be heard by anyone other than himself. "There's nothing in this house at all. Hideo!" He knew what it was now. Hideo! He knew what was missing from his eyes. Hideo! It was fear, and worry, and sorrow, grief, and loneliness, and hate. All of it gone, as if it had drained out of him, leaving just the one thing he had left: anger. "Coming!" he shouted back. Then he went out of his room to greet his father. I became insane, with long intervals of horrible sanity. Edgar Allan Poe.